Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. The drivers are in Jeddah for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and George Russell has revealed that the updates that Mercedes have in the pipeline are certainly exciting in terms of their intention to get back to the front of the field, but he's still expecting a resounding Red Bull 1-2 this weekend. Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Just to explain what is currently on the screen, they were doing kind of the TV testing on the, pre-race weekends, and they changed around some of who the drivers race for. Kind of funny in the way that Stroll is still in Aston Martin with all this drama, Hamilton's in the Red Bull, and even Danny Rick is back on the grid, apparently, with Latifi joining Albon in the Haas for some reason. Speaking of Haas, they released a team statement. You guys might, if you watched yesterday's video, know that we talked about these rumours going around that Haas had sold, I think, $2.8 million of parts to the Russian arms industry, effectively, and they thought they were liable for serious fines based on breaching sanctions with everything that happened at the start of last year. Now, the team statement that Haas say basically just denies it entirely and says, as per our company statement, this story is simply false, both in its overall impression and many of its particular statements, and mentions some key points that they're always in full compliance with US government export control, and apparently it's all okay. So I guess stay tuned if there's any further developments here, but Haas entirely deny anything about this story, and we'll have to see if that initial report gives any evidence to the contrary, but for now, I guess we're going to side with Haas, and hope they've done everything properly, I suppose. Here we go then in Jeddah, and as is tradition here, Albert Fabrega comes out with the rear wing comparison before the weekend. Now, I do want to mention in a couple of minutes' time one additional thing on the Ferrari rear wing, because we saw, of course, they trialled the single pillar rear wing in Bahrain, and it was flexing too much, so they decided to scrap that off and use the older one. Definitely not ideal for them, and they reckon anyway Jeddah's going to be a better circuit for them. I think probably the most loaded here is maybe the Red Bull in terms of the way the rear part is aligned, but the Mercedes does have this deep spoon effect in the bottom part of the rear wing here. Also, is a key point this weekend is that the track is significantly less, it's less harsh on the tyres. This is the Bahrain asphalt, this is the Jeddah asphalt, so expected a one-stop around here, and the cars that suffered massively with degradation, namely Mercedes and potentially Ferrari, should be stronger here in Jeddah as a result, but of course better deg is always beneficial for various reasons, but especially so in Bahrain, as is rear stability, where Mercedes also struggled, and it's doubtful they're going to be able to gain back that performance at the weekend, but Toto Wolff was confident that they're going to be much better now than they have been before. But where do Aston Martin fall? Alonso is very happy with Bahrain, says the circuit is very different, and he reckons it's going to be a big test this weekend, and Ferrari are going to be strong. So feels to me that most of these teams, Mercedes, Ferrari and Aston Martin, they think, yeah, we're basically in a fight for second here, or in a fight for third, really, the third place on the podium, because everyone seems confident the Red Bull are going to 1-2 from, at least from now to the immediate future. Sainz does, though. He's looking at Red Bull and says, here we should be closer to Red Bull. The asphalt is less aggressive, but unfortunately for Leclerc, he's got that penalty. He's starting P11 maximum, and, probably even further down than that if Red Bull are as strong in qualifying as they were, at least compared to race pace back in Bahrain. It might not be the case here, but of course, Perez took pole last year in Jeddah and was unable to convert, largely thanks to an unfortunately timed safety car. Ferrari have brought a new front wing here to Jeddah as one of their smaller upgrades. Not exactly an overhaul, and it's the same story for Mercedes. They're bringing a few new things, but it's not going to be like an absolute overhaul for the car yet. That's going to come in a few races' time, and probably what Russell is talking about here we'll see in a second. But they have been spotted again with the single pylon, as it's described here by Fabrega, rear wing. So maybe they strengthened it or found a way to make it better, because it was not performing how they intended it to perform in Bahrain. Might give Ferrari an edge, but of course with Ferrari, their reliability is still a question mark, and it seems the only thing that's going to stop Max Verstappen is not any of his competitors, but actually, his own bowel movements, I suppose, because as Max Verstappen says here, he had a bit of a stomach bug over the last couple of days. Now he's feeling fine again, but he's postponed his flight and he didn't do any media duties today with the approval of the FIA, and he says, I won't be on track until Friday, see you in Jeddah. So if there's any kind of follow-on effects from this for Verstappen, or if he's not feeling back to 100% for a couple of days, that could affect him, right? That's probably the best hope that we have of a Verstappen not winning this Grand Prix this weekend, is that, maybe he's slightly under the weather still over the weekend, and therefore he doesn't have his top performance, let's say. Maybe Perez can oust him or something like that, but hopefully Verstappen's back to normal again by the time he hits track on Friday. He certainly says that he is. Let's talk about Mercedes then. So they got rid of the sofa, unfortunately, for the press conferences today, and it's back to these kind of chairs. They don't look as good as what they used to have a few years ago. I also thought this was Latifi. I actually thought that looked like Latifi, but it's not. It's Ocon, of course, in the Alpine. screen, but I don't know, for some reason I thought that was Latifi on first glance there. Hamilton didn't seem particularly happy here, and you can understand why. He gave his thoughts on that he's got 100% confidence in the team, isn't going to be leaving Mercedes or anything. Of course, he's not exactly going to say that he is, and says, look, it's about redirecting his focus. At the start of the season, he thought he was going to be fighting for a championship. Now he knows he's probably not. It's about redirecting that focus elsewhere. He's got confidence they can fix their issues, but they're not where they need to be. And Hamilton also comments on those words he said a few days ago after Bahrain, where he mentioned that the team had failed to listen to him. And he says, look, wasn't the best choice of words at the time. Of course, there are times when you're at odds with the other team members, but if we communicate well, if we, I believe 100% in this team, obviously, he's pretty good at media stuff, right? In general, he's not going to exactly say things that are going to be too controversial unless he's in a bit of a, heated state, as you can understand he might have been after Bahrain, believing that it was going to be, way more competitive, that car, than it actually has turned out to be. He also commented on the gap to Red Bull. So Tom Clarkson asks him, do you feel closer to the front this year than you did last year? I think the answer to that is quite evidently no, and that's what Hamilton says. Do you feel like the gap between yourselves and Red Bull is greater? Yep, he says. And based on Mercedes calculations, they are 1.5 seconds a lap faster, Red Bull, than Mercedes are, which is, that is a hell of a gap, at least in the race pace, right? Qualifying is seemingly different, but in race pace, the Red Bull is just so damn good, and Mercedes really struggled in Bahrain. Of course, Red Bull had way more in the tank anyway, and Mercedes reckon they've kind of calculated that we're talking 1.5 seconds a lap to Red Bull, which is outrageous. We'll see if that type of gap maintains here in, of course, Saudi Arabia, and they are bringing some upgrades through. So Mercedes say they're not going to be game changers, these upgrades. These are things they've planned for some time. They might unlock them a bit more time, and maybe another couple of tenths will go their way based on circuit characteristics. So maybe they can get closer, but it's doubtful they're going to get significantly closer to at least where Red Bull are. But George Russell does say, and seem quite optimistic actually about the future, let's just say 4, 5, 6 races down the line, Baku, potentially Imola, I think is when they're probably going to get the big upgrades. Whatever that's going to look like, we really don't know. I'm sure they're still working on it. But George Russell says, just jumped out of the simulator in preparation for Saudi Arabia. Everyone in the factory is working absolutely relentlessly at the moment. Definitely got some exciting things in the pipeline. So does that imply that they've found something or they've discovered something? Because, if they were going down the route they expected to be going and bringing this 3/10 upgrade or whatever Wolf thought it was going to be in Baku, now it's going to get pushed back with some changes. So they think they've discovered something that George Russell's quite optimistic about. I'll show you his words here from what he said in today's kind of a pre-weekend conferences, where he says, yeah, we've got a plan in place. Getting back to the front isn't going to be quick, but he reckons that by Imola time they should have a significant step forwards, which is maybe what he's referring to here.
There's definitely a plan in place. I think it's been clear where we went wrong over the winter. I think we probably overshot with the W13 in terms of the aggressiveness of the car and the bouncing that we faced, and then we probably overshot in the opposite direction with W14 and compromised too much performance with no bouncing, and clearly the lap time isn't there to show anything. So of course it's a difficult pill to swallow for every single member of the team, and this lack of performance is definitely not through a lack of trying or commitment from anybody. But yeah, some big decisions have been made, and we'll be jumping onto a slightly different path already.
How easy is it to turn around? How long are you going to have to wait, do you think, before you've got a car that you think can actually compete a bit more?
That's an impossible question to answer, because we obviously don't know how much the competitors are going to be improving during that time. We'd like to think we can find some performance sooner than later, but when I say sooner than later, that's not this weekend or next weekend. It's definitely a few races down the line. We've got to be realistic. We've got to understand where we are at the moment. It's definitely going to be tough for a number of races to come. Red Bull are really in a league of their own.
Toto Wolff also goes on to say that since Bahrain, they've had open and honest discussions from which we've started to plan our fight back. In the short term, that means leaving no stone unturned in the search of performance. I've already felt the energy and determination in the factory. I don't know that will continue. Now, one thing I've got to say about Mercedes, right, is in previous years, Mercedes have been they don't really do much talking Mercedes in terms of bigging themselves up. They do their talking on the track, right? That's been the Mercedes way. they'll play themselves down, they'll play up the competition, and then body everyone on track week in, week out. That was, well, at the height of the Mercedes dominance, that's what they're up to. Nowadays, they talk a good game, and they can't deliver a car, right? That seems to have kind of flip-flopped in a way that nowadays, Toto Wolff and Mercedes, they're not bigging themselves, they're not playing themselves down, they're bigging themselves up week in, week out, and they still can't get a decent result. So we'll see if that changes down the line, but it does seem to have kind of got a full 180 for Mercedes relatively quickly, despite all the sandbagging accusations that were thrown their way. And Toto Wolff also goes on to say, look, they're going to take us in the right direction. These small developments aren't going to be game changers, but we should give a better account of ourselves than Bahrain, he says. We'll learn more about the W14, how the car reacts. And that's the other thing, right? We don't really know here in Saudi how the different cars are going to fare. Is the Aston Martin going to be any good? I know that many people's predictions this weekend is effectively Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, right? Or something like that, because they expect the Ferrari to be more competitive. But is the Aston going to have fallen off from Bahrain? I don't know. I think this is also a key weekend, though, for Aston Martin to show, like, if they actually want to challenge Red Bull for a championship, if Alonso actually has a chance, this is a weekend where they kind of have to be in the ballpark again as they were in Bahrain, because otherwise, if Ferrari had taken too many points off Aston, and we're not expecting Aston to compete for the championship, right? But if they are to try, then they've still got to be as competitive here as they were in Bahrain, even though many people are saying that they won't be for various reasons based on the track situation. But of course, people obviously expect the Red Bull still to be rapid. So Ferrari, Mercedes and McLaren will introduce minor updates this weekend, and Mercedes and McLaren will have their upgrade packages for Baku, but I don't know if that's still the case. There's been some differing reports on whether Mercedes are going to bring their upgrade in Baku or whether it's going to be in Imola slightly later, a couple of races further down the line. Of course, there's a big break after Melbourne, basically a month off before we go to Baku, where the Chinese Grand Prix was meant to be. So they've got plenty of time, and wonder if George Russell's thoughts on these exciting upgrades that are in the pipeline, they actually have something serious planned, but I don't think it's going to make that much difference for this particular weekend. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.